Good morning, upper and lower sixth. Here we are again. So, I know it's 1.2 minute per mark, but sometimes, unfortunately, students mess their timing up. You need to keep an eye on the clock. You need to practice before going into the exam hall. End of year exams for the lower sixth, the real things for the upper sixth. And if you do find yourself behind, don't leave a blank page because, for example, if you leave this 20 marker blank, you're going to lose 20% of your marks in one paper. And that's probably 2 grade boundaries, so don't do it. So you need to learn survival techniques. So excuse Dobby's language here, but he's got 10 minutes left to write a 20 marker. And he still wants to get at least level 3 because he wants a reasonable grade in the overall exam. So we're going to go through some quick planning tips. This is nothing different than we practice in class anyway. And then we're going to write something that's not a perfect answer, but it's probably a B, and we might argue a slightly higher, but we'll see how it works out. So this is a question that we recently did with the lower sixth to introduce motivation theories. And also those approaches to staffing, employer-employee relations, and also we haven't quite finished organisational structures yet. For the upper sixth, you've done this question last year. This is a past paper question from, I think, 2019, and it's quite a nice question. So we're going to go through it. So we're going to identify the hook first of all. So Starbucks aims to improve employer-employee relations. We know what their aim is, and it's down here again. So we know that this is the hook, okay? So they need to, that's going to be at the end of my chain of argument and in my conclusion, and if I've got time, in my justification. So we need to know what the 2 options are, which are back up to this paragraph, of course. To do this, Starbucks could either focus, option 1, on changing its organisational structure, or extend, as in make more of them. We're going to put a 2 in there, not a 1. This is option 2, flexible working practices. So we need to demonstrate an understanding of organisational structure, flexible working practices, and employer-employee relations. Now, as we know from class, employer, well, this is going to be Starbucks or their senior management. That's what we're looking for in the case study. Employee, there will normally be more than one employee mentioned in the case study. There will be more than one type of employee. So don't keep repeating the words employee. Look for the 2 different types of employee, and then at least you might think how they might act and think and feel differently. Okay, context is king. You don't need to write a lot to get some reasonable marks, and that's what this is all about this session. So we know what we're roughly looking for. So the reason I've written 1 and 2 next to it is when I go to the case study, I can put 1 and 2 next to my evidence. So I'm looking for changes in its organisational structure. So blah, blah, blah. For that sentence, some employees are unhappy about the North Star and how it's affected them. Their concerns include struggling, high workloads, less support, reduced management, understaffing because of the organisational structure. Okay, so we've got 1 minus. There's loads of struggling workers. They're overworked. And some would argue underpaid, but even though they get paid more than McDonald's. Okay, so, and it says here, the organisation has been made flatter. Okay, so we understand the theory of flatter organisational structure. This is possibly a delayering, and it looks here that they've cut staff, doesn't it? They've cut the labour in half since last year. So again, we've got 1. Okay, and we've got a lovely bit there. Staff are treated as a cost. That could come to the end of my chain of argument. And then link it to employer-employee relations. Okay, so we're still looking at option 1 here. I'm looking for a plus of option 1. And here we've got Chris, who is the head of US retail sales. He's clearly an employer. Yeah, he represents the employer. So we've got that identified. Staff are our biggest asset. That could be a nice chain of argument there, counter to that one. How we staff our stores is the most important thing we do. Our managers have great autonomy. Okay, so I've got 1 plus. Okay, I've got my evidence for that. Now I'm going back to I need flexible working practices. So far, I've not read anything about flexible working practices except for my managers have got great autonomy. So they can sort of make it up as they go. Maybe this is part of flexible working. I could put 2 plus next to that as a possible bit of argument. We'll pretend that says plus. Let's get to the last paragraph done. So baristas, we know what one of the employees are now. We've got managers, we've got baristas, and we've got the senior management at head office. So we've got different staffing groups here that we can talk about. We're talking about their average pay, and some weaker students might suddenly get lost into Taylor versus Maslow and not really answer the question. We're now looking for flexible working. Other staff benefits include university tuition assistance. Hang on, there's a third type of member of staff here, university students. Flexible working hours, okay? So flexible working hours, we are now doing a 2 plus as well. We've got our plus evidence, and Starbucks shares and discounted price. Flexible working hours, university students might get hours around their lessons. I think we're allowed to say that. It says university there. I'm hoping university students go to lessons from time to time. I'm also looking for a possible negative of flexible working hours. Well, it might be that flexible working hours means that actually the hours might be available, but I'm still struggling. I've got less support. Reduced management. So it could be at certain times of the day there might be reduced management even though the hours are flexible. And we've got staff that sometimes work on their own. There'd only be one coffee server at a time. Okay, so I'm going to put that possibly down as my 2 negative. Okay, so my plan up here, option 1, option 2, I know what my hook is. We know that the hook is choose which one is most suitable for them to achieve this goal. I've gone into my case study and I've got my evidence. This is the last data extract in the paper. Now normally, not always, normally the 20 marker is for the last data extract in that section because we know that there's 2 50-mark sections. You would have already read the other data extracts if you've done the questions in order. You will know if there's any other evidence that you could be using or the evidence that you've got from a previous question. However, remember, Dobby's mismanaged his timing here. He's got 10 minutes to do this. Reading through this quickly without me doing a voiceover explaining everything and writing 1s and 2s next to evidence is probably going to take you about 2 minutes. Okay? There's not a lot to read here, and if you practice this enough, you should be able to do this in your sleep. You then need to define stuff in context to make sure you're demonstrating an understanding of it. Now, employer-employee relations could be the relations between part-time student staff and the manager, or the managers and Chris, the head of retail sales. Okay, so we've contextualized this and we've demonstrated an understanding of it instead of just silly answers that you might see in the examiner report of therefore improving employer-employee relations. This needs to be a bit contextualized. So we've started it off in a good way. We've then gone on to option 1. It's up to you if you write option 1. I personally wouldn't, but it's there to structure this video for you. Starbucks has recently made its organisational structure flatter, that's application, leading to greater autonomy for managers, leading to some managers feeling like an asset, leading to improved relations between head office and managers. Now, I've used a very basic way of writing chains of argument here. I'm not telling you to change the way you write your BLTs or however you're writing your chain of argument. I just think I did this to highlight that there's 3 chains of argument here at least. Okay, and that's quite important as we go forward to the mark scheme in a bit. But you'll notice I've got a quotation mark there, a quotation mark there, and that's application as well. It's contextualized to death. And that's really important for you to understand, because if you just write a rushed theory-based essay, you will not get more than half marks, probably 8 out of 20. Okay, so, and we don't want that, to be honest with you. We want to be able to throw down a brief answer and it to hopefully get you to mid-high level 3. However, nice language for our counter argument. The reduction in staff means that servers application might be working on their own, leading to staff feeling they are treated like a cost. Application, chain of argument, leading to higher workloads, more application, leading to worse relations between managers and coffee servers. Okay, the hook is about employer-employee relations, and now, because of our lovely definition up here, we've actually got this in context at the end of a chain of argument. Option 2, yes, we've written hardly anything so far. Option 2, you're probably not writing that. For staff who are university students, yeah, we're contextualizing employee, extending flexible working hours might motivate them, leading to servers working around their university lessons application, leading to good work-life balance, leading to improved relations between servers and managers. Okay, we've got servers and managers up here, we've got head office and managers up here. Guess which group of people we're going to talk about in the next one. However, due to the autonomy application given to managers, a more flexible workforce might lead to more organising of staff rotas, leading to struggling with high workloads, leading to worse relations between managers and head office. Contextualised impact back to the hook. It may not be A-level English, well, it actually may not even be GCSE English, but it makes sense, it's contextualised, and there's at least 3 chains of argument there. Overall, we've taken a quick breather, we've gone back, we've reminded ourselves of the hook. We know what the hook is anyway, because we've ended it for all of these paragraphs. I recommend, because that's what it's asking me to do, that Starbucks should focus, words from the question, on changing its organisational structure to add more support. You can't just say, I recommend they change their organisational structure, but don't mention how you're going to change it. To add more support. Now, at this point, I would have remembered that this is possibly a motivation theory question, because employer versus employee relations links nicely into it. I've not mentioned motivational theory throughout my answer. I'm going to use it to structure my conclusion. And it's always nice to use 2, by the way. McGregor's theory Y states creating the right working conditions might improve employer-employee relations. He sort of states it, but it's a bit of application. Now, that's not very justified, and that's probably not going to be brilliant, but it might be. If you get that far, I would argue that you are going to be towards the top of level 3. We've got chains of argument, it's applied, it answers the question, we've got balance for both options, you've got an overall answer there. I'm thinking you're going towards the top of level 3. Now, if I had an extra 45 seconds, I would try and write myself a justification. And the justification for 20 markers is always sort of bad-mouthing the other option and saying, the reason I've chosen this one is because the other one's not as good. And here I've used Hertzberg as a counter. This is better than increasing flexible working, as staff seem overworked and undersupported. That's very much from the case study, which is a hygiene factor according to Hertzberg. More flexible working might benefit one group of employees, as in the university students, but not the managers, who will need to deal with even more work. Now, in some ways, this manager's comment is a bit of a repeat. I was rushing it, yeah. But this this justification sort of says why I've not chosen flexible working. When we look at the mark scheme, excuse all the scribbles here, when we look at the mark grids here, I should say, that this is done. Contextualize, relevant use of data, business behavior. Now here we've got users well developed and logical, coherent chains of reasoning. Now, I do believe we are looking for 5 chains of argument here. There's nothing that says 5 in here, but let's face it, it's 5. Okay? If we look at the level 3, we're looking at users developed chains of reasoning. Now, I think, this is me interpreting, I think we're looking at a minimum of 3. Okay, so actually, I don't think that the arguments are fully developed because we don't have 5 chains of argument. I think we've probably achieved this. Have they used the evidence, quantitative or qualitative? Well, there's no quant stuff here. It's a missed opportunity for calculation here, by the way, but it's not going to add much to it, and it might have sent me down that rabbit hole of arguing about Taylorism, which really doesn't help this argument too much, even though you could use it. And I did this in less than 10 minutes. Okay, so yes, it's used the evidence and it's used it well. Sometimes these tiny paragraphs have got 3 pieces of evidence in it. Context is king. Yeah, so let's make sure we're using it. A full awareness of validity. Well, when you're saying that one group of employees might benefit more than the other, and actually the managers might find it more stressful, you are definitely questioning the validity of that data. Okay, so it is very valid. The significance of competing arguments. This is better than, well, we're ticking that one, aren't we, with this second one. And we've got judgments, effective conclusion that proposes a solution or a recommendation. Okay, so I would argue that it achieves that. It doesn't achieve this 5 chains of argument. So if I've got all of this but this, I'm going to be in level 4. I think depending who's marking this, depends where they put it. Remember, the examiners have this 2-mark flexibility from when their work's being checked. And if this got 15 out of 20, do a cartwheel, celebrate on results day because you've just nailed 75% of your marks from writing something that there isn't a lot here. Now, I need to be honest with you. This is actually quite a good answer. Yes, it could be better, but if it's level 4, then great. Remember, we're not aiming for perfection, we're aiming for level 4. One of the biggest downsides of students writing essays is they waffle. They write loads and loads of stuff, and remember in class we call this the and then syndrome. And then, and then, and then. And then I chuck as much of the theory I can on the page. You could, if you're knowledge-based answers, well, you'd be lucky if you get to level 3. This is, on a bad day, top level 3, low to middle level 4. Hopefully that's useful. Try and write more concise. And remember, context is king. If you contextualize everything, it's so much easier to write, and you'll probably be rewarded on results day. Happy days. Woof.